And, which is a great segue, clip gain. Somebody asked it was sort of like asked the basic fundamental question. James asked, explain clip gain a bit more. Are you doing it by looking at the waveform? Are you doing it by looking at or just by ear? Why does the waveform, why does the waveform show a part as quieter but sounds a lot louder? If you get an uncompressed vocal, how far will you go with ironing out clip gain? I definitely want to say real quick that, what we said before, where you're often getting compressed, processed vocals. And so your clip gain approach is going to be a little bit different than if you just get a completely uncompressed. No, it's not.
It's not. Okay. It is and it isn't. I don't necessarily think that's a distinction that needs to be made. If a vocal needs to be leveled out more than it has been, whether it was just tracked or sent to a mixer, it's the same process.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are lazy and we talk about this and put the RVox on. Well, if someone puts an RVox on, I have to clip gain to match by ear the leveling that the RVox was doing. So it doesn't matter what part of the process. We're trying to get an even dynamic vocal. So allowing dynamics to come through, but also
let's parse that real quick. Even and dynamic. People think, we have a waveform that's here sometimes and it's here sometimes and it's here sometimes. Evening out the level of certain sections or certain words or certain phrases still allows, because you're not using a compressor, still allows the softer parts within the word, within the breath to feel dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're singing higher in the range, the visual representation of the waveform could be smaller looking because it's falsetto, but maybe it's still cutting because of the arrangement. There's so many things that could affect the visual of the waveform versus how we hear it, right?
Yeah,
so that's why the answer to the first question is simple and not, meaning it's both by visual and by listening. And just like using an analyzer is in an EQ plugin, I think AI is great. And if it can tell me that my peak is at 430 and not 440, that I need to reduce, I'm glad that I have assistance. I usually can hear, and it's just validating where my ears told me that I need to reduce, but that's because I'm a trained mix engineer and I've been doing this since I was 15 or 16 years old, but it still is helpful to see that. So it's helpful to have a visual, but people would ride faders and do syllable rides on consoles with no computer. So this is the technique that's been done, and now we have a visual source for it, which is nice. So it's a handicap, and let's just use these as handicaps because a lot of the time a balanced vocal does visually represent itself as such. Well, if something is recorded well.
Yeah, you can do some things visually, but 100% of the time, I believe, I hate to say 100% of the time, but I believe 100% of the time, how it sounds is what matters. Yeah. So if you're messing with clip gain and you're like, but I turned this way up, I turned this to the same volume as this, but this sounds way too loud, well, then turn it down. There are definitely times, there's so much about perception rather than volume. If somebody sings something softly and you put it at the same literal volume as the thing they sing loudly, it's going to sound weird because it's not meant to, like when somebody's not projecting something. Now there's lots of examples where that's a cool effect, but it's an unnatural thing. And you may want your vocal to be unnatural and in your face in a soft, weird kind of intense way. But yeah, if the clip gain looks like it's the same, but one thing sounds too loud, just turn it down. You should be using your ears on all this stuff.
And speaking of using your ears, I'll go as far as in a clip meaning in a syllable, in a phrase, in a word, in a whatever, I'll also adjust the EQ independently. So in Pro Tools, it's option 6, and it's this kind of post-processing screen, which has an EQ and dynamics that are built in per clip. I believe in Logic and Ableton that's existed for so long.
I don't know about this in Pro Tools.
Yeah, it's hidden. Option 6 on the numpad.
No shit. All right.
Exactly. Nobody knows this. It's such a secret. Why is it a secret? It's a lot of post people use it because it's basically Audio Suite. It's basically Audio Suite per clip.
And is it which EQ plugin is it? Is it their EQ3 or whatever?
EQ3. It's like built in. Yeah. So I just do So if you're a proximity effect on a word, or there's a like a pop, a plosive, you can filter up that one thing. You're not audio suiting it like people used to have to do. You're just doing it per clip. Now, if you commit the track, then it will commit all of those moves as well. Right. But I'll go as far as doing that. I've talked about this on the talk mix. I automate up saturation on certain words to help balance the texture. Maybe Khalid stepped back from the mic a little bit, and I missed some of that grit that was in that mid range. So I'll automate up a saturation or a clipper plugin on a syllable. So either it's automation, but this case I'm doing audio suite. So a clip gain to me is more than just volume. It's EQ and it's saturation. Never a compression. I don't add a compressor to that part of it. I'll clip gain into my limiter, into my Fairchild, into whatever dynamics I have. With a ceiling of -6 or something. So I'm at least giving myself a little bit of a handicap that I don't want to go over.
This is an important thing. I just had the thought. I feel like these talks should be called non-shortcuts or long cuts or something like.
Yeah.
Like what we're talking about is, a lot of this stuff can be solved for a lot of mixers by just putting the time in. I mean, that's the reality of it. Like what we're talking about is just the reason why there isn't a compressor that's going to work for your vocal all the time is because if you spend the time to do all of these nuanced things, you don't need the bad artifacts from that compressor. You can even out your dynamics, but it takes more time. I mean, that's the reality. It's like, this is why you get paid what you get paid. And, this is why why professionals are professionals, is because sometimes it takes a whole lot of really nuanced work. And it's just the reality of it. And you got to understand that, you're talking about adjusting what we just talked about there with clip gain is adjusting the volume of a particular word so it matches the rest of it, and adjusting the EQ of that word just in that spot so that it evens out the performance. And if you imagine a whole 3.5 minute vocal performance, you might be doing that a lot, especially if you're not getting a well-recorded vocal from but even great vocalists, like someone like Khalid, who's amazing. It's not something he did wrong. You're just like, that was the take and it's great, but I need a little more volume. I need a little more mid-range so it hits the saturation just the right way for this one word, because that's going to make this whole thing subtly better.
It took me 2 days to clip gain and kind of understand what Kesha's vocal was going to feel like on Praying. Ryan Lewis, it took him a day or two after he comped it, and then I did another comp and then another clip gain. Like, that was 4 days of vocals.
And she's a great singer. She's a great singer. This is not a knock on her. This is what it takes sometimes.
Yes. So I want to use that to add another layer. It's not because we're trying to only balance out. We're trying to get a feel. We're trying to get a vocal feel when someone's that good of a singer, right? So if you take a limiter and you clamp down the entirety of the vocal, that's dictating the feel instead of letting the singer dictate the feel, right? So when I say, or when we both say balanced and dynamic, the dynamics are what determine the groove and the feel of the performance. And we also need to keep it up front because it's a pop record and we need you to hear the lyrics and it needs to drive the record. Like, there's all these purposes, but I think that this is an opinion. I'm not quite sure that anybody else feels this way based on how I hear vocals over compressed all the time. I think the listener will lean in to listen when they love the song with a vocal that is a tiny bit more dynamic than a lot of mixers are leaving their vocals. I really have faith in humanity and ears and passionate humans that really care about music, that they're going to be okay with something that comes and goes a little bit, just a little bit.
Well, people have to remember too that, and even in the way we're talking, things are dynamic, things are up, things are down, things are forward, things are softer. What you're doing is you're translating human communication. I mean, this is getting very philosophical about it, but a vocal isn't meant to be something that just sticks right. It's like a vocal.
So annoying.
A vocal is something that is a dynamic communication. And if you think about the way people speak, with spaces, with dynamics, with emphasis, you're trying to enhance that process. Now, certainly against a wall of music, you're going to need to squish the dynamics sometimes, but not to the point where you're just putting a limiter on it and then it stays in one place. A vocal should feel like a performance.
Yeah, and also I'm learning that people from me do want a bit more of a compressed sound sometimes. And when they do, I'm just trying to learn and practice other ways to do it than just clamp down on it with a plugin. And I'm figuring it out. I'm still practicing. I'm still learning. The project you talked about that you're working on, I'm also working on different songs, and we finally got it across the line.
Right.
And with everybody happy, and it's 5-6 dB quieter overall. The vocal is so loud, and last night I got asked, go a touch further on the last chorus. It's like, it's too far. And now the last note that I have to do after this is, hey, can you ease up on the de-esser now? It's like, it's just too loud. I wouldn't have to do that. It's I don't know what people are listening on. So that's another point. But when I put it in my car, my AirPods, and my PMCs up here, it's just too loud. So I don't know what people are listening on, but it's hurting. I can't even turn the record up to evolve into, everything else that I listen to. So
I have lots of thoughts on it because I'm working on the same project as you. So I understand, but it's a challenge. Yeah. Part of it is people getting attached to early versions of things. We've talked about this before with limiters and dynamics and things on rough mixes. Like people get attached to things. The first version or two you do, no matter what it is, people will get attached to it if they love the song. And a lot of our job is kind of trying to translate that and pull apart some of the intense dynamics. And it's a challenge.